So share screen here. All right. So let me see if there's any other housekeeping things. So you can pour all the wine into your glasses if you haven't done so already. I put in the email, these are richer, bigger wines than we've done in the last couple tastings. So they benefit from some air. So if you're just putting it in the glass now, that's fine because you'll have some time before we get to them. But they do really open up nicely in the glass. So to see their full potential, it's nice to give them some air. So if you have them in the glass or you're just putting them in the glass now, you can give them some swirls and they'll hopefully open up a bit. Let's see, you should have spit cup if you want it, not required. It's a Saturday afternoon. And water if you need it, some bread, something to rinse out your palate. These wines are kind of palate fatiguing. There's only 5 of them, but by the end you might want something to something neutral to taste if you're going back and forth between the wines. Great. So let me just make sure this is working. Can everyone see the screen that I'm sharing here with the 5 wines on it? Or can anyone not see that? You can chat or ask. I guess chat if you can't see that. Great. Okay. So we've got 5 wines today, and they're all reds. They're from different regions. They're kind of in groupings of 1, and then the middle 3, and then the last one. The first one's from Burgundy. So you can see right here, it's 100% Pinot Noir. Second one, we're going due south all the way down to the northern Rhone, and then the number 3 and 4 are further south from that in the southern Rhone. Then we're going all the way over to the west coast of France, where Bordeaux is on the Atlantic coast right here. So the first wine is from Burgundy, 100% Pinot Noir. It's from Roger Belon, and it's from a town called Marange. And if you've never heard of Marange, that's okay, because it's kind of an unusual town. It's at the very southern end of the Côte d'Or. It's left off some maps, and for a long time it was thought of as a very kind of a rustic town that produced wines that were on the margins. It's physically on the margins of the Côte d'Or. It's the last town before you get to the Côte Chalonnaise. But really, kind of stylistically, it's on the margin as well. They're rougher wines, they're a little bit more tannic, a little more gritty, less elegant, less kind of polished than you'd find in the rest of the Côte d'Or. A little kind of harder to appreciate on their own. That's how it used to be. In recent years, as summers have gotten a lot warmer, the grapes have gotten a lot riper, and winemaking technology has made it so it's easier to produce wines with a little more polish and a little bit more finesse. And actually, lastly, the market for Burgundy has continued to rise so much that there's demand for wines even at this level. So the winemakers can take a Marange, which used to be able to get for $10, and it wouldn't really make sense to spend a lot of money trying to polish that wine. But now, when you really can fetch a little bit higher price tag for that kind of terroir, it's easier to justify spending a little more time in the cellar with the wine and the vines with the wine. And the results are that Marange really has become, I think, a place for particularly good value in Burgundy, particularly in warm years like 2018. So I'll stop blabbing for just a second. So wine number 1, Marange. I invite you to smell and taste it now if you haven't yet. So it's 100% Pinot Noir. The producer is Roger Belon, who's this guy here, the guy on the left. He makes wines all up and down the Côte de Beaune. So he's based in Santenay, which is the next town up. Santenay is right here. He makes wines in Marange, Santenay, Chassagne-Montrachet, Puligny-Montrachet, Meursault, Volnay, Pommard, really almost the whole lineup from the Côte de Beaune. His reds are all 100% Pinot Noir. His whites are all 100% Chardonnay. So this is 100% Pinot Noir today. And this is pretty representative of his style, which is very fruit forward. He uses a very long, slow fermentation. When wines start to ferment, they actually, the tanks warm up because of all the fermentation actually just produces warmth as a byproduct. And so he has these cooling sleeves that he puts into the tanks, the fermentation tanks, to keep them from overheating. A lot of places do this, but he's very particular about not letting the fermentation get too hot because he believes that the fruit dissipates a little bit when you kind of overcook the wine during the fermentation. And so his primary focus is retaining the fruit in the wine. And you can see it's right there. And this is 2018. This is a young wine, just came over actually. But there's that nice, really juicy cherry, some raspberry, nice earthy notes in the back, but mainly kind of pleasant young fruit. And in the mouth, you can see it's young, but the tannins are young but not aggressive. Marange used to be referred to actually in the Côte d'Or as le médecin, which means the doctor. And that's because they used to, obviously without admitting it, take Marange and blend it into wines from towns in the rest of the Côte d'Or that needed some work with, that were too thin, that needed help with their tannins. They don't do that anymore, or they don't mention it if they do. They really don't need to, because the wines have gotten much riper in the last 20 years there. But Marange, as kind of just an ingredient in bulking up a thin wine, really is a story of the past. Marange has now got some real character to it. It's not nearly as complex as you'd find from Pinot Noirs from further up the Côte d'Or, or even some wines in the Côte Chalonnaise, honestly, you could find with a little bit more polish than this. But for pure kind of easy drinking, young drinking pleasure, I think he's done quite a good job with this. Question: would someone age this more? You definitely could age this more, and in fact, it's kind of the paradox we always find with Roger Belmond's wines, is that they drink so well young, and the fruit is so pretty. And honestly, even in like 2 or 3 months, the tannins will have softened even more on this, and it'll just be a very silky, mouth-filling wine. They actually do age very well, though. The trick is that we always drink them kind of, because they're so drinkable young, we don't age them. And so when we find a case that we forgot about from 2013 or 2014, and we open it, and the wines are just beautiful. They're much softer. They don't age at the same complexity as a Vosne Romanée or even a Volnay. But they really do pick up nice tertiary, secondary, mushroomy stuff from, if you do age them. So this is a candidate for aging, but I would say, the fruit, his wines are so nice at keeping fruit, and they're so nice at presenting a young profile, that I prefer to drink them young, but it's definitely a preference and not a rule. Any questions on Roger Belmond and wine number 1? Let's see if I forgot anything. I think so. Marange is right next to Santenay, and Santenay is considered a better town. The wines, the terroir is a little better. The wines will age a little better. This particular Premier Cru is on the border with Santenay, so it's kind of considered one of the better terroirs in Marange because it's almost Santenay. Excellent. Okay, so from wine number 1, we're moving to wine number 2, and you can see we are going due south, all the way down to the northern Rhone. What food pairs well with Marange? I'd say the usual suspects for red Burgundy. At the higher end, game, duck or fine cuts of meat or veal or pork is all really nice. With the Marange, because it's a kind of a little bit less fancy, a little heartier wine, kind of charcuterie and crackers. It's a nice, it makes for a nice, if you're trying to pair up Pinot Noir with appetizers, it works well. Often Pinot Noir needs kind of its own space, and you need to give it a fair amount of contemplation and a fair amount of, you can't have a spicy food next to it. You can't have a cheese that's too strong. With Marange, I'd say there's a little bit more breathing room, so you can it's a little bit heartier, and can stand up to a little bit broader range of things. Okay, so wines 2, 3, and 4 are all from the Rhone Valley, and the Rhone Valley stretches from, you can see here at the top, Lyon, all the way down to Avignon in the south, and then pretty quickly, I guess you can't see on this map, but the Mediterranean is not far south from here. So here you can see this is not too far from the southern coast of France. And so wine number 2 will be from the northern Rhone, which is here, stretches from Lyon to Valence, and then 3 and 4 are from the southern Rhone. And from Lyon to Avignon, Lyon at the top here to Avignon at the bottom, is about 140, 150 miles. So it takes, a couple hours by car on a highway to drive straight down. And it's basically due north-south. But these are two parts of the same region in that they are both named after the Rhone River, which you can see kind of twisting through here. But really stylistically, they're quite different. So wine number 2 is from Cornas, which is at the very southern end of the Northern Rhone. So you can see this is, we've blown up the Northern Rhone here. And it starts with Lyon up at the top, and then there's Côte-Rôtie and Condrieu. This is Saint-Joseph, which stretches through here. Hermitage is here, Crozes Hermitage just below it, and then Cornas and Saint-Péray. And Saint-Péray is all white. But Cornas is the southernmost red wine town in the Northern Rhone. And the rule in the Northern Rhone for reds is that they're 100% Syrah. They stylistically usually throw in a couple grapes of Viognier just to give a little bit more perfume. But with very few exceptions, and really for most of the actual meat of the wine, it's 100% Syrah. They don't blend any other grapes into it. Cornas is at the very southern end of the Northern Rhone, and you can see it's not terribly far, maybe 10 or 15 kilometers south of Hermitage. But they often harvest a week earlier than Hermitage does, because it's quite a bit sunnier here than it is here, and they just get more little. You can see to the hills face, the Hermitage hill faces kind of southwest, and Cornas is a bowl that faces mostly east or southeast. And so they have quite different characters. Cornas is thought of as on the kind of rustic end of the Northern Rhone. Although in recent years, that again, like Marange, that needs a little bit of revision, because people have started to make stylistically slightly less rustic wines there. Cornas is also a tiny appellation. I wrote down how big it is. It's 145 hectares. To give you a bit of a point of reference, Châteauneuf, which will be wine number 4, Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the Southern Rhone, is 3,100 hectares. So it's 20 times the size of Cornas. Cornas is a very small town. There's only about 50 winemakers in the town. And one of the better known ones actually is Stéphane Robert, who makes this wine. The Domaine du Tunnel is his domaine. He is a youngish, very kind of well-respected winemaker who, through luck and kind of good negotiating trading, ended up with this remarkable collection of quite old vines. So his average age of vines is like in the 50s or 60s, and he has several cuvées that are just 100-year-old vines. And so again, 100% Syrah, and you can see obviously in the nose next to the Pinot, worlds different, might not even be the same country, you'd think. This is kind of classic Northern Rhone Syrah, very dark, very kind of meaty and spicy, and a lot of people, when you smell this, you would think that they're relying on oak to kind of give it all those kind of spicy, woodsy notes. And in fact, only 10% of this wine is oaked. So all of those kind of dark, peppery, wild, kind of foresty notes are coming from the Syrah itself, and that's what the Northern Rhone does to Syrah. It takes a kind of grape and all of its dark, juicy fruit, and adds this kind of savory, mineral, spicy background to it. The Domaine du Tunnel, which is this domain, is named Domaine du Tunnel because they make their wines in this, which is an old railway tunnel, 100-year-old railway tunnel that obviously doesn't have any trains in it anymore. This is Stéphane Robert right in the middle here. And it's a remarkable place because it's a tunnel that goes right through the earth, and it's, I think, probably, well, I don't know, 100 feet at least of earth directly above this before you get to the rest of it, before you get to the soil. And what it does is it creates a perfect, very consistent, perfect humidity, consistent temperature climate for aging wine. So they have this lovely, obviously very brandable, as you can see by his whole sign here, but really quite effective way of making wine. Yeah, this wine, the Northern Rhone Syrah is kind of its own thing. Nothing really, it doesn't really taste like anything else, and nothing quite tastes like it. Yeah, you can see in the mouth, much bigger, much kind of darker and inkier than the Marange. Definitely more tannin there too, but they're not tannins in like a high alcohol way, in a hit you over the head with tannin way. They're more kind of providing structure that kind of channels all of that big rich round fruit and spice into a little bit more compact package. Did anybody have any thoughts on this wine? And then actually, I think I have a poll for you because those are fun. This one, more than any of the others, actually will benefit from some air. So if you did just put this in the glass, do quite a bit of swirling. And I'll just take the Marange question actually and apply it to the Syrah. So pairing wise, for me, Syrah and lamb are the perfect pairing. Particularly with this, a kind of a spiced lamb, maybe a, I don't know, North African, Moroccan kind of lamb. It's just the combination of those two flavors is lovely. Okay, let's see. We'll do a poll here. Whoops. Okay. So just a quick, easy up-down vote. Which did you prefer of the two single varietal wines? So yeah, I should say these are the two wines that are not blended that we are tasting today. This is always interesting to watch live. It's like watching an election or something. There also, we'll get to this at the end, but this is independent of price. You'll see there's a noticeable price difference between these two wines too. All right, let's see. Got most people answered. And okay. Oops. Can I share the results? There we go. Okay, so there are those results. Marange 11, Cornas 7. Interesting. Yeah, they're certainly. I can see why people are doing that. It's pretty evenly split, but the Marange certainly is a little easier to drink, particularly on its own. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. All right, let me go back to. Let's see. Would you agree that the Cornas is more food dependent? Absolutely, 100%. I think that exactly what I was saying. The Marange, I think, is easier to drink on its own. The Cornas, I will say, in maybe 5 to 10 years, and with the right meal, I think would probably win in an up-down vote. But I agree, just having them on a Saturday by itself, the Marange is certainly less dependent on food. All right, so let's go back to here. Okay, so wines 3 and 4. We're now going to the Southern Rhone Valley. And in the Southern Rhone, let's see. Southern Rhone, so here's a blow up of the Southern Rhone. You can see Châteauneuf-du-Pape is here, Avignon is right here. Châteauneuf-du-Pape is about 20 minutes north of there. And then there's this plain here that stretches out, and then you can't really see it on here, but this here is here are the Alps, so you can see it. These are the foothills of the Alps here, and so these are a whole bunch of pretty impressive looking mountains, not alpine mountains, but foothills, I guess I'd say, that provide really nice terroir and nice kind of exposition south and east and west, depending on where they are. And it's this little crescent here that goes Rasteau, and Gigondas, Sablé, Séguret, Vauqueyras, Beaume de Venise. They all kind of make wines that are of a similar style to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, but don't have quite the cachet or quite the same terroir as Chateauneuf. So now moving to the wine number 3, which is the Clos du Joncat Gigondas. So Gigondas, usually people would say, maybe with Rasteau, is the second most impressive terroir in the southern Rhone, next to Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This is a newish producer for us. It's a very old school producer. They don't do any fining or filtering. They don't do, very low sulfur, very low intervention in the fields, and very low intervention in the cellar. They don't own any barrels. It's really remarkable. You walk in there and there's just concrete tanks. They don't have even big, even Foudre, the big barrels that don't really impart any oak flavor. They don't have those. So they're completely unoaked wines. They're 100% whole cluster, which means they don't take the stems off of the grapes when they're fermenting them. So they're wines that are, how wine was made 100 years ago, or closer to that. They obviously have a little bit better handle on, the alcohol levels and the acidity and the pH. But in general, their style is to make wines how their grandparents made wines. This is the one of the winemakers. They're two sisters, Carol and Danny Chaston, and they've been making wine. They're the third generation, but the domaine has been around for 100 years. They're really wonderful wines. They're very kind of honest, stripped down wines. And actually, while you have these two up, have a look at, if you take two of these like this and look at them over a white piece of paper, look at 3 versus 4, because these are the two Southern Rhone wines, and you'll see the difference between a filtered wine and an unfiltered wine. The unfiltered wine is much more opaque. It's much harder to see through. The filtered wine, number 4, is a little clearer, a little easier to see. And I think you'll taste that too when we get to the two of them. So this wine is 80% Grenache, some of which comes from 100-year-old vines, like very, very old vines, some of which is, in the 50s and 60s. And then the rest of it is Mourvèdre and Cinsault. So there's no Syrah at all in this wine. So we've done Pinot Noir, Syrah, and then this is Mourvèdre, or mostly Grenache, Mourvèdre, and Cinsault. And you can see, actually, very interesting to go back and forth. Grenache and Syrah are the two main grapes of the Southern Rhone, and Grenache really is the main grape of the Southern Rhone. But you can go back and forth between these two. They're almost studies in the two different grapes, of number 2 being all Syrah, number 3 being almost all Grenache. You can see the fruits in Grenache are redder than they are in Syrah. They're a little bit more strawberries instead of blackberries. They're just a little bit more kind of higher toned fruits. Maybe strawberry jam. It's still the Southern Rhone. There's still a lot of heat there. It's still very rich. So these aren't light wines the way that the Pinot Noir was kind of light bodied or light toned, but they're a little bit, they're not Syrah. You can see that Syrah is kind of dark and spicy and licorice. This is a little bit brighter. And in the mouth, wow, yeah, you can obviously see that you're not in this Northern Rhone anymore. Grenache is just a much bigger, broader, more mouth-filling grape. That keeps going. Geez, that's a year older than the Cornas, actually, and a year older than the Chateauneuf, which we'll get to in a second. But it's a remarkable amount of substance in the wine. There's a really nice note that wine writers and people that make things up like me call garrigue, which is the kind of the underbrush of the south of France, Provençal underbrush. It's kind of a word that's probably overused, but if you have any firsthand experience with what the underbrush or what the earth of the Southern Rhone or Provence looks like, I think it's a useful word. It's kind of a combination of the earth and the clay and the stones, and then the herbs, thyme and rosemary and lavender and things that are in the Southern Rhone. You can see there's just kind of the sweet fruit and the sweet spices with it. You also get a little bit of a sense of the whole clusters, which provide a little bit more when you ferment with the stems. The stems have to be perfectly ripe, and but it gives it a little bit more of a structure and kind of tension and definition in the tannins than if you ferment with just the berries. That's quite good. We've got, are there tanks lined? Yes, the tanks are lined. They are lined, they're kind of enameled. I don't quite know what the substance is, but they're aligned with some kind of enamel. Number 3 is delicious. I agree. Aging. So I think this came in for wine number 3. I'll say that wine number 2 for sure, but wine number 3 is a really good candidate for aging. Particularly, you can see that you know, I love the fruit and how it tastes now, but the fruit will dry out a little bit as it ages, and those kind of young, small, kind of lower, earthier tones will come more to the fore. When we tasted with her, tasted through. In fact, I think nope. Never mind. This is the town of Gigondas, which, if you're in the area, is a lovely place to go. We tasted with her back to, I want to say 2009, and the wines weren't even a little bit tired. So, and that was 2 years ago. So 9 years after harvest is the oldest we've tasted. But wines of this caliber and of this character, with all the intensity that they have, really do age quite well. You will lose a little bit of that really nice juicy strawberry jam fruit that you have there. If you taste this in 5 years, that will be a little bit dialed back, and the kind of earthy, mushroomy secondary stuff will come out a little bit more. And I like that too. So I guess the answer is yes, it's a candidate for aging, but you don't have to. It's kind of more of a personal choice. Food pairing for number 3. Number 3 go well with red meat. Yes, definitely. The classic pairing for Chateauneuf du Pape, and I think I would extend it to this wine, is cassoulet, which is a bean and duck and pork stew, kind of a stew because you bake it then. Anyway, it's a dish from Provence, which is lovely. But yeah, I think red meats would go really nicely with this. I think you could do, maybe something grilled rather than pan-seared. I just, there's something in this that almost tastes smoky a little bit. I know it's kind of blown off now. I think you could find, I think meats for sure, and more specifically, maybe a kind of a more rustic cut of meat, maybe not a tenderloin or a filet mignon or something. I would probably reserve that for a Burgundy, something with a little bit more kind of oomph. Actually, one of our other producer in Gigondas served us last time we were there, which is the Domaine Les Goubert. They served us essentially a Boeuf Bourguignon, but they refused to call it Boeuf Bourguignon. They called it Boeuf Provençal. It was essentially Boeuf Bourguignon. It was a kind of a hearty beef stew, and that went really well with the Gigondas that they served. So I think meats and stews and kind of hearty wintry dishes will work with this. Okay, how does this compare to the Vacqueyras? Good question. The Vacqueyras is, I assume you're referring to the Vacqueyras from the Clos du Joncat, which is this producer for number 3. The Vacqueyras is a little bit more rustic. It's a little bit less deep and kind of, it's just a little bit less complex. Not a lot less complex, but a little bit less complex. The Vacqueyras is probably a little bit easier to drink on its own, though, just because the tannins are kind of dialed back just a touch, and it has most of that nice dark fruit that 3 has, but not quite the staying power and the kind of depth that 3 has. So I probably wouldn't age the Vacqueyras as long as I would age the Gigondas. In fact, I definitely wouldn't. But for pairing, I would say pairing would be similar things with those. Okay, so number 4, we're now going across the Rhone Valley. So number 3 is Gigondas right here, and number 4 is Chateauneuf du Pape, which is right here. Vintage to seek. In the Southern Rhone, they've had a really good string of vintages. 2013 being an exception. No, 2014 being an exception. 2014 was tough. In fact, a couple of producers didn't make a 2014 because the just the grapes didn't ripen enough, and they decided that it wasn't. Two of our producers actually didn't produce a 2014, which is unusual. I mean, you can imagine quite a financial hit. But they just decided that the 2014 the wines are just a little bit lighter in body and didn't quite have the depth. They're okay, and they're kind of better at the simpler level, at the Côte du Rhône level, but not at the Chateauneuf level. But past that, really, anything in the last 10 years they've had really good years. They generally have less vintage variation in the Rhône because it's a lot sunnier, and they don't quite have the same problems with mold and hail and frost that they have in Burgundy or Champagne or even in the Northern Rhône now. But it's sunnier, and the weather varies a little less than it does in Burgundy or Bordeaux. And so there's a little bit less variation in the quality of the vintage. The character of the vintage certainly changes, but the quality changes, I would say, less. So wine number 4 is a 2017 Chateauneuf du Pape from Christophe Mestre. Oh, and before I forget, can I get everybody to quickly take out your phones and just take a picture of your tasting setup, and then you can text it to me, or you can email it to me. I'll give you the phone number. You can text it to me, but you can also just reply to any of those emails. Just want to kind of see how you guys are tasting and where you're tasting, and I will send you a copy of where I'm tasting, my small little office. So wine number 4 is from Chateauneuf du Pape. It's from 2017. Actually, I should say 2017 was a little bit of an unusual year in the Rhône as well, because the Grenache, the flowering which usually is in like June for Grenache. The different grapes in the Southern Rhône flower and then harvest at different times, which makes it kind of tricky to follow them. But in the Southern Rhône in 2017, Grenache had a very tough year. And I'll text. Sorry, so you guys can see this. This is my phone number. If you can text photos to me or just email them to me, that would be much appreciated. So Grenache had a tough flowering. There was a flowering, and then there was a hailstorm or a frost or some kind of thing. And so the amount of Grenache and the quality of the Grenache in 2017 was much less than usual. And so a lot of the wines in 2017 have an interesting character, which is that they have a lot more of the non-Grenache grapes. One of the examples to that is this one. Usually, Christophe Mestre's Chateauneuf du Pape is like 80%, 70 or 80% Grenache. And this year, it's 30% Grenache and 30% Syrah. So there's a lot more Syrah than usual. He made a lot less of it because he couldn't stretch his Syrah as far. But it changed a little bit the quality of the character of the blend, and so the character of the wine. Chateauneuf du Pape is a fancier terroir than Gigondas. But I've chosen this one in particular because he makes a kind of a more modest Chateauneuf du Pape. This is what it looks like, by the way, on the ground there. These huge stones called galets roulés that actually trap heat and trap cool. They trap heat, so when it gets cold at night, they keep the vines warm, and then in the daytime, they prevent it from getting too hot. So they act as a mitigating factor. They keep the temperature of the soil a little bit more constant, which you don't have in a lot of the other places. Chateauneuf du Pape is obviously a very well-known appellation. Christophe Mestre's style is to make a wine that is less kind of age-worthy than Chateauneuf du Papes often are. He doesn't extract it quite as much, which means it doesn't keep it on the skins during fermentation for quite as long, and he doesn't oak it quite as much, or really very much at all. And he makes this very pleasant, kind of more modest style of Chateauneuf du Pape. You can see, I think the contrast with the number 3, the Joncat, is very interesting because stylistically they're worlds apart. This is kind of a much more conventional and polished wine, I would say. There's a little bit more clarity. He finds the wine a little bit. He doesn't filter it, but he finds it, which takes a little bit of the kind of, gritty earthiness from the low intervention Clos du Jonca number 3 out of the wine. So this is a little bit more maybe finesse, but you can see a really nice collection of kind of fruit and spice, and a little bit of a higher, redder character than number 3, I would say. But you can see that Chateauneuf length is there. Maybe not the breadth that the Jonca has, but it's kind of more compact and it's kind of longer. It's interesting to do those next to each other. Sorry, questions I should be getting to here. Phone number. Oh yeah, I put it into the chat. Maybe it's not. So phone number is 215-498-0189, and I'll put that into the thing again. How does Mestre compare with Andre? Ah, 2 people have asked that question. Good question. Andre is actually the first thing that we thought of. Andre, Jacqueline Andre, or the Domaine Pierre Andre, is our other Chateauneuf-du-Pape producer that we work with. So we have 2, we have Mestre and Andre. And the comparison is is noticeable. It was interesting when we first tasted with Madame Chastain at the Clos du Jonca, wine number 3. The first thing we thought of was how much the wines reminded us of Jacqueline Andre. So much so that we mentioned it to her, and she said, "Oh, we're quite good friends, Jacqueline and me." So it's a small world down there, but you can see why they would be friends, because stylistically, the way that the 2 of them make wine is very similar. Low intervention, no fining, no filtering, very old school, whole clusters. And so I would say that Andre is Andre's Chateauneufs are kind of what wine number 3 would be if you put it in the terroir of Chateauneuf-du-Pape. So, a little deeper, a little bit more complex, a little bit more polished, but that same kind of wild, lower intervention style that the Jonca has. Let's see. What else is blended with the Grenache de Syrah? Good question. There's a little bit of Mourvèdre and a little bit of Cinsault. So it's 60, let's see, 60, 30 Grenache, 30 Syrah. The rest is Mourvèdre and Cinsault, and he may have a little bit of a couple other grapes in there. I don't quite remember, but that's most of it. Yeah, I think this is interesting between these 2. They're wildly different. Actually, I think that's the poll that I have next. Hang on. Okay, so you can see not all the soil in Chateauneuf is like this. There's actually a bunch of it that's limestone. It's kind of like limestone just sitting on the surface of the earth like this. And then here's some more earthy stuff. They have some clay. There's some sand. It's a large appellation. They have lots of different things. What's interesting about Christophe Mestre is that he makes a single cuvee, 1 white and 1 red. And a lot of producers in the Southern Rhone, will make a luxury cuvee, or they'll make a cuvee just on the Gallet Roulet, or a cuvee spécial, and he's saying his style, which is how it used to be, is that he makes a single cuvee that represents the appellation Chateauneuf-du-Pape as a whole, 1 white and 1 red. Yeah, let's get into the poll here. Oh, there we go. Okay, hang on just a second. So poll between these 2. Okay, between which of 3 versus 4 do you prefer, the Gigondas or the Chateauneuf-du-Pape? Oh, and I'll answer another question. How has COVID impacted the producers you work with? Not well, as you might expect. I think a lot of the producers we work with deal directly with restaurants in France, and so that's that has really dried up. I think a fair number of them sell a lot of their wine through their front door, just people from France or from elsewhere in Europe or from around the world coming up and buying from their from the domain itself, and so that's obviously taken a big hit with the lack of tourism. For us, it's been we've had a little bit of a silver lining in that we've been able to purchase wines. Sometimes, particularly in Burgundy, we get allocated a small amount of wine, and so we get 20 cases of wine, and we buy it every year, and we never get more because they sell out. And they pick, you get 20, you get 20, you get 20. And this year we were able to go back and say, do you have any more? And a lot of other importers have said, other importers who weren't able to move as much of their product gave up some of their allocations. We were able to buy wines more than once that we usually never are able to buy more than once. Okay, so I just think this is pretty interesting. 13-7 towards the Gigondas. I guess I'm not surprised by that. I think I was thinking actually the Gigondas would score higher than that. Although the Chateauneuf really does have a polish that Gigondas doesn't have. So it's really, I would say it's a stylistic thing. Okay, close this. I apologize if I was sharing that other one. Let's see. Okay. Screen share. All right. So last wine, number 5. So we're going all the way over to, I think this is working, right? Am I sharing? I'm just sharing one. If I'm not sharing it, tell me. If you can't see the map of Bordeaux, someone chat in there. Great. So this is a map of Bordeaux. Bordeaux is on the west coast, entirely different region, entirely different style, entirely different set of grapes, different history, different traditions, just about as different as you can be from anywhere. Burgundy and Bordeaux are often put, in the same sentence, just because they both start with a B and because they're the two most famous wine regions. Oh, can't see the map. Hang on. Let me see here. Let's see. 1 second. Oh, hang on. Okay, can we see the map now? I think we can see the map now. This is how it looked before. Yes, good. Okay, sorry about that. So Burgundy and Bordeaux. So Burgundy and Bordeaux, I was saying, are usually said in the same sentence, but Bordeaux is in fact 10 times larger than Burgundy and produces 10 times the amount of wine. And so it's a much bigger, it's just a much bigger area, and there's much more wine that comes out of it, and so much more wine that makes it over here. It's usually divided, at least the high-end Bordeaux is usually divided into 2 halves, the left bank and the right bank. And the left bank means this stuff here. This is the city of Bordeaux, if you can see here on this map. And then to the northwest of that, as the kind of goes up here, this is the Gironde River, and then this is the Atlantic. Right before the two of them meet, there's this long plain here called the Medoc, and this is where most of all of the famous left bank wines, except for one down here, come from. Saint-Estèphe and Pauillac, Saint-Julien, Margaux. These are kind of the famous left bank Bordeaux towns. On the right bank is actually the right bank of, there are 2 rivers here. There's the Dordogne and the Garonne, and when they meet, they form the Gironde. But the Dordogne is this one here, and it kind of snakes this way here. And on the right bank of the Dordogne is the right bank area of Bordeaux, which is generally Saint-Emilion and Pomerol. Today's wine comes from Saint-Emilion. And I should say the grapes are different in Bordeaux. Bordeaux's grapes on the right bank, or on the left bank, are usually Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot in that order. On the right bank, they're usually Merlot and then Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. Usually, actually, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon. The winemaker here is Christian Dauriac, who's this guy here, and he was a biopharmaceutical executive who retired from that job early, and is now the winemaker at the Chateau Montlis. Chateau Montlis, which is this label here, is a Saint-Emilion Grand Cru. His other property, or one of his other properties, is Chateau d'Estiaux, which is a Saint-Emilion Grand Cru Classé, which is a little bit more exclusive. But so this wine is 85% Merlot and 15% Cabernet Franc. And you can see just in the nose, you know, has essentially nothing to do with any of the first four wines. A totally different profile. Merlot, you know, from all the way back to Sideways has kind of a bad rap in that it's very easy to make Merlot. It's a very high yield grape, and you can kind of plant it wherever, and it produces a fair amount of grapes. So it's relatively easy because of that to make not that good Merlot. There are places where Merlot really thrives, and one of the places where Merlot really thrives is on the right bank in Bordeaux. And so here, Merlot, it's grown in pretty gravelly soils with a fair amount of limestone, so you get a little bit more definition, a little more tension in the wine. You can see it's kind of hard to hate on Merlot sometimes because it's just velvety. You know, it's not a. I wouldn't say this is a subtle wine, and it's certainly, you know, big and rich, but it's just, I don't know, it's just juicy, and it's a nice, this wine does have a nice amount of, it's not a pushover. There's a little bit of structure, some kind of nice tobacco licorice stuff in there too. But just the character of Merlot is just mouth-filling and big and velvety. Someone says, I love Cab Franc. Yeah, Cab Franc is nice, and Cab Franc really does add a fair amount of you know, non-Merlot. I think if you tried this wine and it was just Merlot, it wouldn't nearly be as interesting. Cab Franc adds a little bit of that savory, the spice that comes through is often from the Cab Franc. 2016 in, would you pair with this? Pairing with Bordeaux, for me, just is, you know, a nice steak with a lot of fat. I think I've said steak for all of the answers to these. But Merlot, you know, Bordeaux, and in particular Merlot, really works nicely with red meat, and actually particularly with red meat with a fair amount of salt. There's almost a little bit of a salinity in this wine that isn't in the others, and I often find that a well salted or like well browned steak pairs particularly well with Merlot. Optimum age for this wine, good question. So for his other wine, Chateau d'Estia, I would say the optimum age is 5 or 6 years, starting to be 5 or 6 years out, and then they can age, you know, quite a while after that. This one I would say is ready or almost ready if you're into, you know, kind of not $600 a bottle Bordeaux. I think this delivers nicely on what it's promising. And I think, you know, it will continue to soften. We've had this particular wine, Chateau Moli's, actually back a couple years ago. We brought in, he had some extra of the 2002, and we brought that in, and that was really nice. It was much drier and a little bit earthier, and didn't nearly have the mouth-filling texture that this does. So, you know, as the wines age, they'll thin out just a little bit, and they get a little bit woodsier, a little earthier, and the fruit will recede. But so I wouldn't say there's an optimum age for this. I think it's probably a judgment call. I think it's, you know, in terms of tannins, if you had a steak with it, I don't think it would seem tannic at all. Maybe a little bit. Next summer it wouldn't. Okay, let me do the last poll. So I invite you to share any thoughts about these 5 wines. We obviously covered a ton of physical ground in terms of where they're from, and stylistic ground and different grapes. The theme Autumn Reds is pretty loosely put together, but you know, it did get cold. The last couple of tastings we did, it didn't match the temperature didn't match what I pitched for the wine. So this one actually did match up. Okay, so let's launch this poll. Here's independent of price. Which wine of these 5 did you prefer? Particularly with the reds, I would, encourage you to go back to them too, because this is we're an hour, almost an hour in, and they really do develop nicely in the glass. Let's see. Shonka, new producer, votes for Shonka. That's good. Oops. Oh, very interesting poll numbers though. Let's see. I'll give just a couple more seconds to vote in the poll. For the Morange, if we go back to the Morange, the first wine after all four of these non-Burgundies, it just seems like it's like screaming red fruits, like you almost just took it out of the vineyard. Okay, so end the poll here. So this is very interesting. Morange actually wins this tasting, but it's a very even distribution between all 5 wines. That makes me glad. Question: are we going to rank all of them? I don't think that's the poll that I have. No, that's a good idea. I should have you guys rank them all next time. If you would like to share your ranking, though, you should go ahead and do so. I didn't set that up as one of the questions. The next question, I think the last question, is taking price into account. So I've added the prices in here, and just which of these do you think is the best value? Interesting. Any questions that I didn't get to? Oh, tariffs. Yeah, tariffs are not fun for anyone. We've been able to, weather them without increasing our prices by 25%, which is the tariff on most of these wines. Although I have to say, a number of these wines are above 14% alcohol, and the tariffs are only on wines below 14% alcohol. It's funny, in Burgundy, essentially nothing is ever above 14% alcohol, except that in 2018 they had the hottest year on record in a long time, and a number of the wines are above 14% alcohol, and so exempt from the tariff. This one, number one, is not. But yeah, I think our supply chain. My father is the importer, and I'm the retailer, so I think we're able to kind of smooth out the cost increase, and the prices in Burgundy go up a little bit every year, and so we've been able to kind of keep the same trajectory of, we try to keep a wine at the same price for a couple vintages at a time, and then we'll jump it up a little bit to the next one and keep the same price then. It's a little tricky, and I wish there weren't tariffs, but we've been able to weather them, I think. So this is interesting. I'll share the results of this. This is with pricing included. The Saint-Emilion and the Gigondas tie. No votes for the Cornas, which makes sense actually, because it's in a different price category and was on the independent of price, kind of tied with everything else. A couple of votes to the Morange, a couple of votes to the Chateauneuf. Good. Well, this is good. I'm glad these are all seem to be a good range of preferences and of other things. Okay, so I think that's all I've got. This is sharing. Yeah. Oh, okay. So yeah, there are 15. If you're inclined for any of these wines, just for the people on this tasting, there's 15% off of any of these 5 wines. At the and I'll send you an email follow-up after this for 24 hours. And the code is Zoom19. And then there was something else I was supposed to. Oh, yeah. So futures. I'll just give a shout out to futures. Is the September futures ends tomorrow. So none of these wines are in it because these all have come in beforehand. But there are wines that are of similar styles. We have a Northern Rhone, a couple wines from the Côte de Beaune, like the Bellon. We have 2 Northern Rhone producers, Bonafont and Côte Rôtie, and St. Clair and Gros Hermitage, which deliver Northern Rhone Syrah. We have Southern Rhone and Bordeaux, actually. So all of the regions are represented. And then we've just finalized our next tasting, which will be next Zoom tasting will be October 24th. And we're going to go very narrow on this one. This one we went a little wider because we were doing all autumn wines, but from different places, different grapes. So for the next one, we're going to do a single vintage and a single strip of land, and just 2 different producers, and then 5 different towns. So each wine will be from a different town in the Côte de Nuits. They'll all be 2015, and we don't have 5 wines from the same producer, but this producer stylistic change you'll see we're limiting. So this will be a study really in terroir, and in the power of terroir. So we'll be keeping everything just about constant with the vintage and the winemaker, and just seeing what the different vineyards in these 5 towns, Nuits Saint-Georges, Vosne-Romanée, Chambon-Musigny, Moët-Saint-Denis, and Gevrey-Chambertin, can give wine with no other added variables. Well, great. If there's any other questions, don't hesitate to email me afterwards. But I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you guys have a nice rest of your weekend. And hopefully you didn't sign up for this with too many other people, so you'll have a couple of these left to have with your dinner this evening. Great. Well, thank you guys again for participating, and I'll talk to you later.